discuss whatever you guys want to discuss, and I have, the brief outline of what you guys put together for your work plan, and then my understanding was you guys kind of want to do it together and make sure you were all on the same page about your talking points for next week's dinner with the town board. So I'll pull that up as soon as the computer behaves. Look at that.
Turn this on. Maybe while you're doing that, Stephen, I know we have some guests here. Did you folks want to say anything? I mean, we're just having a work session here tonight. We don't have anything on the agenda. We're just going to talk about some issues that we're going to bring up with the town board next week at our dinner.
Well, we were just interested. I'm Kelly McCauley. I live in Saddlebrook.
Can you guys come to the podium? Sorry.
Hi. Kelly McCauley, 1950 Shamrock Drive in Superior, obviously. No, just Kate is a neighbor of mine. We're, worried about the Saharis property, 88th Street, Anderson. We just want to keep our ears open. So we didn't know if you guys were working on that tonight.
I don't think we have anything on the agenda on that. We're really just, Stephen is pulling up our kind of our work plan for the coming year, which is really fairly broad, but just general topics that we want to be able to cover. We're not going to take any action tonight on any of those things. Okay. But you're certainly welcome to stay and listen and whatever. I mean, it's fine. We like having company. So.
All right. I don't know. What do you want to do, Kate?
I mean, I'll probably just read over everything.
Okay.
You're going to what?
I'll probably just read it off.
Okay. I guess I'm going to go with her. We just thought we'd pop in, and
sure.
I'm trying to get more involved in what's going on. I've been here 6 years, and I'm finally, getting clued in. So,
well, we
anyway,
want to
thank
encourage
you guys
involvement.
Thank you for your time and what you guys all do. Appreciate it.
Our pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Sure. Thanks for coming.
Thank you.
Hope you have a productive evening.
Thanks. Well, who wants to go first? What do we all want to do? Just tick through these things and talk further about issues we want to cover next week with the board? Is that kind of what we're thinking?
I think you'd asked us to come prepared to bring some topics and do your stuff.
Oh, yeah?
Well, I can certainly ad-lib on one or two, but you guys feel free. Does anybody want to jump in on anything?
I have 3 or 4. I'm sure one or two. I don't know. So,
Close it? Okay.
So probably my interests have to do with Northwest Superior, and there's just as I brought it before, a concern about the potential development that could happen in this area, the deep concern about the infrastructure and what's not so much even what our roads can handle, but what we can tolerate as a neighborhood, as the neighborhoods down here. That'd be Sagamore and Coal Creek Crossing and Original Town, with Sura being the regional area, and then just the potential for who knows what multifamily that's already pre-zoned in some areas. Rogers Farm being in application, or I don't know if it's in an application at this point, but it's being discussed. The transit-oriented development of RTD and what they might want to do. Side comments from years ago about even adding residential to the Sura area. There's just, and then the potential redevelopment of areas of Original Town. Prior to being on the Planning Commission, I met with a gentleman who's looking at 5 or 6 properties over on the other side of Original Town, and probably single-family homes. But then we have the Kuffner property. That whole block is zoned multifamily, and what that looks like. So I'm interested in discussing whether we could make a recommendation to the board, and I think we have board support as well. But to do not sure how to phrase it, because it should be a comprehensive plan review, but for a small area. Do it, with some of the discussions I had last night, where could we do it in small chunks, right? So could we just take Northwest Superior, do a comprehensive plan review and kind of focus on this area? I was going to bring up some other areas that I don't know if we can talk about tonight, but there are other areas of town that need some attention, and then there's a large portion of our town that just doesn't, right? Because it's all under PD, and it's just not all that critical. But it feels like the Northwest Superior area, and I was thinking both comprehensive plan, transportation plan review, so that we can address traffic issues everywhere from this area, including, I think that includes everything from the diverging diamond back down Marshall and up through the marketplace and Sagamore, Coal Creek, and Original Town, and just the impacts. So.
Sure, so you could approach it as like an amendment or an addendum to the comprehensive plan targeting, this particular area of town.
An update, an update on the policies that impact this part of town.
Similar to, like Denver does small area plans, Louisville
Mhm.
does some small area plans. We
Yep.
have one in South Florida, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Certainly feels appropriate to me when you look at all of the pressure and the differing opinions related to what people are allowed to do by right versus maybe what is the appropriate scale and some of the conflicts. And then you've got some conflicting policies with the gridded network that, is in the comprehensive plan, but yet not necessarily, the desires of the neighborhood. So I think
Mhm.
that there's certainly a lot of discussions that it would be unfortunate if development happened without those people.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm supportive of that. I think it's a good idea. I think if we, we kind of did a straw poll, I think at our last work session, to see if folks had thoughts on these issues in original town and preserving the character of original town, and it struck me that, now I don't want to speak for the whole commission, but it struck me that there was widespread support for doing something along those lines, and if we're gonna do it, I think we ought to do it before development really takes off in
Mhm.
that area, and it's hard to unring the bell.
Yes, I agree. I think that we also need to be very clear about what our goals are for this. And if we do stir this up and open this can of worms, so to speak, are we gonna be ready for the outcome and what that outcome might look like? I think there's, support to preserve the integrity of original town. However, there's also plans for growth, and I think a lot of people are, interested in seeing that as well. So, for me, it feels like we just have to be a little bit careful about what we're asking for, and we also have to be very clear about what our goals are and what we're looking for.
Well, and I really want to get the community engaged, because, I think many of us are open to, if people want original town, bulldozed and redeveloped into something new, then let them come forward and talk about that. If we want to preserve it, let's get together and talk about that. If we want a mix of some sort, what should the neighboring communities that are going to get built that are bordering original town look like? Do we want more like Coal Creek Crossing? Do we want less like Coal Creek Crossing? Do you want interconnectivity? Do you not want interconnectivity? What impact is it going to have on, we're feeling it on Coal Creek Drive because we're up against the marketplace, so we're feeling the impacts more so than the people on William and on the other side of the creek. But as Rogers Farm builds out, they're going to start to feel that pressure over there, and there's several open blocks over there that.
What's Rogers Farm? Is that to the south?
That's
here?
right. Yes.
Town Hall?
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah. So.
On the other side of the creek.
Yeah. So just trying to get people together so we can figure out what it is we want to do. And I think that's going to end up impacting the land use code to some degree, or it could end up maybe flowing into, do we want the land use code to remain as it is today, because we know what we're capable of putting on a 40 by or 50 by 140 lot. So we know what that looks like now. So
Recognizing property rights too, though. It's
Yep.
always a balancing act
Exactly.
too. If someone has investment, you know, potential or expectations tied in with property that their current zoning has, and so certainly compromises probably would have to be part of the discussion, but.
Yeah. Well, if we get out what we're looking for, then discussions with developers go differently, right? As they come forward with plans. What it looks like to develop, I mean, one of the multifamily, on the land use code side, the multifamily zoning gets weird when you're trying to develop 3 lots, right? And in town that a developer owns. The board's struggling with it already today. It's like, okay, how do we take this application and, you know, make it fit, right, and look good. You know, they can come in and do something, but they know it doesn't look nice, and they'd rather do something that looks nice, but
Right.
but then our zoning is such that it doesn't permit it, and then yeah, it's kind of a strange situation, and I think we'd all like it to look nice, you know. And
It seems to me too that transportation is a big part of that, you know, I mean, that is something that we can control, and I think it doesn't directly impact the property rights issue that, you know, Lisa's identified. You know, Original Town is, you've got families with small kids there, things like that. We got, you know, I think, Bob, you previously identified some increasing transportation concerns that you're seeing down there with cut-throughs and whatnot. And I think those are issues we ought to be focused on. Because we're gonna get more and more traffic.
Right.
With all of the amenities that we're adding here.
yeah, I
So
mean,
we
we're
gotta
adding
figure it out.
thousands of people.
And I think we've got to put transportation right up, we have to figure that out before we start developing, or at least considering, because everything comes to a point right here, basically.
Yep.
36 hits McCaslin, everything that we do down town center is gonna have to come through there and then disperse throughout when it leaves. How is that gonna be taken into account? And then when you start building houses behind, and start going east toward 88, how are you gonna handle all that flow? And I got the impression from Alex that, you know, budgets are gonna be an issue, that certain things have exhausted funds, and now we gotta maybe get some creativity in terms of how we're gonna pay for whatever it might be, signal lights at different intersection, whatever, I have no idea, but to me, transportation is a huge problem, because if it gets bound at this point where everything comes together and converges and then doesn't dissipate, I mean, then we got a major problem in terms of how are you gonna get offices in there and workers in there and all this other kind of stuff.
And I mean, it might need to apply enough pressure that the budget gets adjusted to deal with
Well,
these pressures, right?
I'm
You
just
know,
wondering if that's
and
something that we wanna, whether we push or whether we raise it by suggestion or however the semantic is.
Yeah.
I think you evaluate the policies, you know, so that the policies guide this future development. You know, do we want connectivity to disperse the traffic? Would we rather keep the neighborhood local streets quiet but have really big and potentially overcrowded intersections? I mean, it's all a balancing act and a give and take, and I think it's establishing those policies of kind of which do we prefer, you know? Do you want more traffic on the local streets, but maybe the intersections aren't so bad? Do we not? Keep the local streets quiet, and then Marshall and McCaslin, you know, what do we do? So I think those are the types of discussions, though, that as a community, we need to make some decisions on, and then that then helps inform, okay, you know, Rogers Farm now is gonna be platted, do the streets connect or not? You know, well, we've already had that conversation, and so the developers understand, the neighbors understand, you know, everyone's all on the same page then with, better expectations. So I think the discussion is overdue, you know, honestly, when you listen to the concept plan reviews that have been before the board and the, you know, the frustration, I think, on both sides. The developers are frustrated. They have, you know, by right zoning with expectations in the code on the technical requirements. It's not what the board wants to see. It's not what the neighbors want to see. And, you know, I think at the end of the day, we're not doing anybody any favors by not having these conversations up front, so.
And I think the board's ready for a recommendation from us, you know, if we want to, to take that on, and I suspect we'd be assigned and it would be approved for us to just get to work, you know, on a comprehensive plan / small area plan related to comprehensive plan, transportation plan, if we can come up with a wording.
I'd like to see us do that. I mean, just kind of,
Transportation from like 128th all the way to 36 on McCaslin.
Yeah.
And everything that comes with it.
Yeah.
Speed, volume, all that stuff.
and
Noise.
I don't want to hijack the conversation. I want to let you continue,
Oh, no, I'm
Bob,
good,
but
yeah.
well, first of all, I want to commend Stephen and also Martin. They were very helpful in getting me a lot of information about the transportation plan I brought up, I think, at the meeting before last. And I probably have 10, 15 minutes to circle up with you guys on, so don't let me hijack this.
No,
mean,
I
but
won't
others
let
wanna-
us leave without a recommendation. Seems like there's enough interest here. So.
Well, I agree with you 100%. I mean, I think we gotta get out in front of it. And it harkens back, in my mind, to everything that led us down the path of adopting a transportation plan several years ago. And the premise behind that, I think, was development is coming. You know, we're gonna be building this town out, and how are we gonna manage it once that's done? And so, anyway, Stephen and Martin were wonderful about kind of going back and helping me to refresh my memory. And I'll try to keep this brief so I don't bore anybody, but the transportation plan that we talked about, it was, I think, 14 or 15 months in the creation. And it started in November of 2012, I believe. Does that sound right?
Probably, no.
And ran through, let me,
February 2014 or something?
yeah, let me be accurate. That's exactly right, Lisa. February 2014 is when it was ultimately adopted unanimously by the board. It was adopted unanimously by this commission, with Commissioner McCool making the motion to adopt. And so we went through, and I offer this to those who weren't on the commission at the time and might not know as much about what happened, but during that 15-month process, there were, I think, eight meetings of both the Planning Commission and the Town Board and the Traffic and Safety Committee, 8 different meetings and hearings. There were 4 community outreach meetings over the course of that 15-month period. There was a survey that was done of the whole community with 54 respondents offering feedback on the survey. And what I'd like to do, and I would be happy to get you guys copies of these things if it's at all interest. I'd like to get you copies of what the community said was important to them. And so this was before, I think, we put a shovel in the dirt on Town Center, but we knew it was coming. And what the community, I think, in the data speaks for itself, but what everybody was coming back with to us with was, number one concern is safety, and number 2 is managing McCaslin. That was, I think, that when you look at the respondents and the number of respondents, that's pretty much what they were saying. And so fast forward to 2017, and my questions to Alex at the meeting before last: how do we stand on implementing the McCaslin corridor vision, which is specifically identified in the transportation plan, and what, I think what Alex offered was, we're focused on these things. We have other budget items we have to deal with. We don't really have immediate plans to do anything about McCaslin, really, between Christensen and 128, and which to me was disheartening. And I don't lay that on Alex, just to be clear, or staff at all. I don't think that's anything they have any control over. What I have learned in talking, or communicating rather, with Martin and with Stephen, and trying to get an understanding of, frankly, what if we were to decide as a commission, or what if I were to persuade you all to decide that we should do something about that, and we shouldn't wait 10 years to do something about it. how do we go about it? And what Martin had responded with was to say, look, staff would be thrilled if planning commission would get involved and say, town board, we recommend that you make this a priority, you know, you need to implement it. So I'd like us to do that. I don't think we do it here because this is a work session. I think it, you know, we put it on the agenda for discussion. I'd like to come back to you guys with actual data that you can look at to understand why I think it's important. So I think Bob offers great insight into the issues that are of paramount concern to our friends and residents up here in original town, and I think we gotta stay real focused on that. But I think if I can offer insight, it's into what's important to the folks who live between Colton and 128. You know, there's a whole, and I probably wouldn't even start Colton, I'd probably say Rock Creek Parkway and 128. They have a different set of concerns, but they're all tied to the same thing, really, which is safety. You know, the term that was being used in the transportation plan was traffic calming, but just slow down the traffic, just manage the traffic, you know, noise mitigation, stuff like that. And, you know, as I hear Bob identify the issues in original town, I think that are very valid, it strikes me that we're talking about the same thing. You know, we're talking about how do we manage this? We want development, we want smart growth, but we don't want to do anything that's going to undermine the character of our community. You know, I think that's kind of ultimately where I land. And I think when you look at the transportation plan and those, and think back on, I know Lisa, you were pretty intimately involved in all of that. You think back on what our residents were telling us 2 or 3 years ago, it really came down to that, you know, just find a way to manage it intelligently. So that's my kind of preview of what's stuck in my craw for 2017 and what I'm hoping we can move ahead. I know timing-wise, I think the budgets are being set soon, so I don't know that we, you know, this is something where we would say it has to happen like in the next 6 months or something like that. But certainly saying 5 to 10 years, that's not, I'm sorry, but that's just not acceptable.
Yep.
I mean, I go back to the Empire State Building was built in 14 months, in case anybody was wondering. But I always think that gives you some perspective on what we're capable of doing in 14 months, so. Anyway.
Well, and certainly, I think when you look at the political will of a community, you look at how much kind of voices came out in support of the new park. I don't remember the new name. When you listen to the fact, you know, when you look at, that wasn't budgeted for a long time. We had the property, it was turned over, but kind of there was a, you know, an uprising of folks here in that part of town who said, look, this is really important to us. They had political support clearly on the board with a really strong advocate for that. They got a really large budget passed, which I would imagine could go a long way for improvements on McCaslin. And so I think you're right. I think, you know, getting that word out, because that particular investment would require, you know, the town to pay for it. There probably isn't anybody else, you know, maybe Dr. Cog funds or maybe something else, but likely McCaslin improvements are on the town. So it's up to us and others to raise that, I would imagine.
No, and I mean, I agree with you. I think it's all, I think this is all tied together. When we look at the next 5, 7 years, and the number of people that are gonna be moving into this town, having a clear picture of how we want people to move around this town is going to be critical. I think there's a huge education piece. I think there's a need to create a flow that people want to use, the flow that we want them to use to get in and out of downtown Superior and the marketplace, and whether it's out to 128, that we do everything we can to encourage the way we want people to drive. Because what we're struggling with now, you know, there are people who are cutting through, you know, some of it's because they're, you know, they just they just, it's not pleasant to make the turn into Marshall Road and to deal with that whole entrance into the marketplace. It's much more enjoyable to drive up Bull Creek Drive, right? And people don't even really think about it or realize what it's doing. It's the same thing on McCaslin. It's it's habitual to come down 128, or come off of 128?
Off 128.
Down at 55. So I mean, it's the road's built for that. You're coming down that road, you can't help. I mean, you can take your foot off the gas on an automatic, and you're going to be at 50, 55 unless you're hitting your brake, right? So it's the way things are set up. It's encouraging this kind of driving behavior. And I think just figuring out how we want people to drive through town. I mean, Rock Creek Parkway is, people are pretty good on Rock Creek Parkway. I don't know what it is about that road, but I don't see people doing 55 miles or 50 miles an hour up and down that road. I mean, they're doing 35, maybe 40. And
I think the transportation plan, though, and I remember a little bit when we were discussing that with the traffic calming, and we hired even a landscape architect, I believe, to develop. He developed pretty extensive plans. They were in some of the early versions, and I don't know why they eventually got pulled, if it was lack of support. You may remember, some of those where there's a crazy amount of right-of-way there, so there's certainly a lot of physical space to do some of the things that they've done on Rock Creek Parkway, which you notice when you see like the alternating, you've got the enclosure with the trees, and then it just naturally calms, and then the curves and things like that. So I think a lot of just the way Rock Creek Parkway is physically built, it assists in some of that. You don't have that on Colton Road. You've got that nice long stretch on Colton Road with, no kind of compression around you to visibly make you feel like you need to slow down, and we have traffic speeding on Colton, and I think we all are aware of that. And I would think that roundabout that everyone has talked about, I don't remember the name of the street. Indiana and McCaslin, a roundabout at that location makes a lot of sense. And I know Alex advocated for that, and I believe it's in the plan. Just to get people to slow down
If I can interrupt you, Lisa, because I went back through the, I watched the meetings where it was presented by Alex, and I was there, but I'd forgotten 90% of what was said. But I recall now that the premise was we have a roundabout here going into the town center, and then a roundabout in Indiana, and the idea was that if you have travelers coming through, it kind of signifies to the driver, you're entering into a community here, and so you got to kind of stay alert, And Bob, to your point on Rock Creek Parkway, I agree with you. I mean, I think it's nice that you don't see a lot of speeding on Rock Creek Parkway. It has a very residential feel, I think. You've got trails on the sides and people are running and whatnot. McCaslin, and I look straight down McCaslin, so I mean, I see it every day. You do have people out running and doing, cycling and doing the things with the cross-country skis with the wheels on them, But we don't really have it set up like it's made for that use,
How do you create that feel, that look, that you are in a community? You're not, and I mean, our speed limits. I mean everything. 45-mile-an-hour speed limit means do 50 to 55. I mean that's how we drive. Until you get down to 35 or 40, do people only go a mile or two over the speed limit in areas, right? But when you're at 45, you may as well do 50 or 55. It's, especially when the roads are like that.
And I got to tell you, first thing in the morning, I was up at 4:30 this morning making coffee, and trucks coming down off of 128. If they're doing 60, that would be charitable.
Yeah.
It's like an interstate. It's crazy.
Yeah.
Yeah, it starts to slow down a bit as more commuter traffic gets on there, and it just has to slow down. But I really think we ought to do something about it. We got to figure out. Well, we've got the plan in place. We just got to do it.
It's like a ski jump hill, You drop down from 128, and you're immediately in a 45-degree slope or some such thing. And you have to ride the brake the whole way to hold it to 45.
Yeah. And a lot of that goes back to the design scheme. The road is designed like a, county road. There's not a lot of
That's
curves.
right.
It's wide open. You've got none of that, There's
That's what
no
it
visual
was.
things to help you slow down, so.
Yeah, that's what it was
Well,
for a lot
we got
of
there's
life.
there's
Yeah.
signage, there's police, there's, different ways that we can retrain the users to a certain extent, but.
Nothing better than making it uncomfortable to go.
Right, I mean, it's the same thing, Colton. Colton is built, I mean, it's a straight lane, and you see people flying on Colton all the time, and the only reason that they do slow down is because there are a lot of turnoffs into Safeway and different roads, and then the sheriff's department does a good job. I constantly see people pulled over on that street, so I think it's, to your point, I think the way that the road is designed, landscaped, and everything does impact the speed. And it's definitely something that, you know,
So we can get a realignment of McCaslin from 128 down to, let's say, Rock Creek Parkway, to realign it to make it swing back and forth and compress.
There's
For
a
the
plan out there that did
sidewalks
that.
or
Mhm.
like obvious bike lanes
Yep.
on either side or something like that to
Yep.
Make it look
Plant-
residential.
plant some
Yep.
trees, make it look residential.
Mhm.
And, you know, I don't know, maybe put a monument that you're entering the town of Superior.
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
there's a sign
Yeah.
up there, but it's just a normal traffic kind of sign. Put a nice monument as you're entering the town of Superior.
Yeah, we need more. I mean, that's what I want in our neighborhood too. I mean, you're coming into original town, you know, the speed limits, I would like our speed limits to be dropped down to 20 miles an hour, right? And do things to discourage people. I mean, I don't wanna you can't really prevent people from using it, but make it discouraging, make it clear that, you know, you're going by homes and
Yeah,
you're in
it's
neighborhoods.
residential.
That's right.
This is a residential community and, you know.
You know, in anticipation of some of the potential pushback we might encounter, and because we've been through the rodeo before.
Yeah.
When we were going through the transportation plan years ago, there seemed to be this countervailing view that if we manage traffic, we're discouraging development, or we're discouraging people from coming to our businesses. And it occurred to me throughout that whole conversation, you know, when was the last time I thought, gee, I'd like to go to that restaurant in downtown Louisville, but by golly, I have to drive 20 miles per hour in the last 4 blocks through a residential
Yeah.
community.
Right.
You know, people don't think like that. You're gonna go to where you're gonna go. I mean, that's the bottom line, and it's, the question is, are we gonna make it safe and tolerable for our residents? That's pretty much what it
Make
comes
it
down
flow
to.
nice. I mean, we want it to be easy.
Mhm.
I mean, I even look at coming across the diagonal, what a nightmare it is to turn into the marketplace.
Mhm.
I mean, it's unfortunate, but, you know, why don't we have 2 lanes just flowing right into the marketplace, right? Instead of everybody fighting to get over into that one lane to make that turn. And unfortunately, we've designed the poles and the islands and stuff for, to some degree, I remember even for residential crossing, I'm thinking, well, that's just goofy. I mean, yes, I've crossed there before myself, but generally we'll go under, you know, we have places to go under Caslin, and that's where you should be directing, you know, people who are walking or biking, and do things to make it nice to come in. I mean, I love the 3 lanes out
Mhm.
of the marketplace. I think
Makes a
everybody's
huge
getting
difference.
it, they're understanding it, it makes
Yeah.
sense. You know, you see a little bit of cutting over, it's getting less and less, you know, people being in the wrong lane that have to get over it. It's made such a huge difference, you know, and just extending lanes in the marketplace just to give cars, because that's what we built, that marketplace is regional, it's for cars to come in. We have great parking, right?
It's very auto-oriented development,
Yeah,
certainly,
yeah,
right?
and so let's, you know, build on that, make it easy and let people get in and out of there. And as we're thinking about downtown Superior, you know, I know Main Street, we were talking about, I mean, needs to be slow and, but other parts of it, we need to be able to move traffic in there at 30 miles an hour and get them into parking and get them back out to where it's enjoyable to go in there. Then it's, you know, then it's just a place you want to go because it's easy, right? You're not sitting in traffic, you're not frustrated because you're in the wrong lane, or, you know, just being thoughtful about how we move cars in and out of here, I think is.
Well, and I think we're really fortunate as a community, not just because I think we got a great commission of people who are sincerely interested in making our home a wonderful place. But, you know, I gotta tell you, I mean, Alex is a real asset. I mean, he is a real gem.
Absolutely.
I don't know if you guys have ever looked at his bio or read any of the stuff that he's published, but I mean, this guy is like a foremost expert on the very things we're talking about. And so I think, man, I mean, we're never gonna get a better opportunity than we have now with the group of people that we have who are able to weigh in on these things.
Plus the need's there.
And the need is there.
Yeah.
And it's just gonna become more and more of a need, you know.
I'm
of each year,
Right.
so.
Totally agree.
Commissioner Sawtelle, you mentioned pushback, and the transportation plan was orchestrated prior to my being on the planning commission. What kind of pushback did you guys experience back then? I mean, I can see budget constraints.
I don't think that
But-
came up as much.
There was some philosophical stuff. They didn't like the
Yeah.
idea of a signal or anything to finish up Indiana and McCaslin intersection.
Yeah.
They didn't want to consider having a two-lane turnaround at Colton.
Mm.
Everybody said we did one lane, that's enough, that kind of stuff. I don't know, I can't recall if we ever went into signage, a sign that says, at the top of 128th, a sign that way for I-36, trying to encourage some people that aren't
Yeah.
habit bound yet to go in a different direction.
Yeah.
I think I don't know if it's overly simplistic, but making a list of every possibility and then trying to wheedle out the ones that,
Yeah.
probably are ineffective and focus on the ones that aren't, but, and then how do we, what's the protocol if we want to get Alex involved? I mean, do we invite him? Do we have to make a request? I don't even know how that works, but he definitely, knows his stuff.
Yeah.
I think we put our recommendations together to the board. I think you have an extremely receptive board right now to, especially to this area. I know to McCaslin and the traffic issues. I think if we formulate some recommendations, maybe they likely will get tweaked to some degree, but I think you've got an extremely receptive board that would put us to work on any of these pieces that we want to tackle.
Yeah.
I'd like
I feel
to
really
go
good
for
about
it.
that.
Well, and
Yeah.
I think,
for it, too.
I think Jerry, I'm all in, guys. If y'all want to do it, I'm in. But I think to answer your question, just based on what I can remember, there was this, I think in a lot of, and there was a lot of dialogue around the transportation plan, so I mean, lots and lots of discussion from both in this room and in the community, in the meetings. And I think there was a kind of a false dichotomy that was set up, where some folks thought, well, if we take measures to manage traffic, especially on McCaslin, then we are, by definition, discouraging people from coming to use our town center. And to me, that's just a false choice.
I think it's the opposite,
I think,
basically.
I think it is too. I mean, I don't think any rational consumer makes shopping decisions based on what was the speed limit for the last mile between me and my destination. I just don't think that happens.
Well, and also slowing traffic down coming through the town for those commuters from Arvada to Boulder or to Louisville or whatever, as they come through, if you're slowing them down, they're gonna recognize the different things, the different amenities that are within the town, and maybe more apt to stop and shop, instead of just using it as a throughway. And
I think you're right, Jason. I mean, I think to the extent we can predict behavior, I mean, it seems to me when I'm driving through a community that's really a nice community, it's, beautiful, there are, trees and street lamps and trails and things, I'm much more inclined to want to stop than if I'm just using it as a speedway.
Or if I'm looking to buy a place, or if I'm looking to have a business housed somewhere, I want to make sure that it's easily accessible and those kinds of things. So relative freedom of movement is everything, not a discouraging. You want to manage.
Being able to
your
park when you get there, right,
Oh,
which
yeah,
we're great at. I mean, we've learned from the communities around us. I mean, it's challenging to get into Boulder on the weekends. It's challenging to get into downtown Louisville on the weekends. It doesn't have to be challenging. We're building this from scratch. I love the idea that we could be multimodal and pedestrian and all that good stuff, but the reality is people use their cars. If we build to that, and we should be able to accomplish both. We should be able to teach people, or not teach, but encourage people to be responsible in our town, to provide multi-lane access into different venues so that, you're not forcing traffic into lines the things that annoy people, right? If you're moving, the speed limit's not a big
Right,
deal.
that's
I mean,
right.
if you're moving and you know when you get there, you're gonna have a parking space, you don't have anything to rush for, you don't have anything to hurry for, you don't have any, you know, it's just a comfortable drive into Superior, right?
So when the transportation, when everything was being worked on, were there any numbers that separated out between commuters that are just using McCaslin to get from point A to point B versus the number of residents that were using it on a daily basis?
Yeah, that's a great question.
I can't recall if the numbers were broken out that way.
I don't,
I think the data's there. I think he'd have to maybe parse it a little bit and figure out, you know, like on the,
Some educated guesses, I think.
well, and look at, you know, what was the traffic at the top of the hill, and then what's the
Right.
traffic immediately after Indiana, and, I mean, they
Or
have a lot
coming-
of that stuff, and then, you know, they can run models
Yeah,
and things like
it
that
almost,
too.
it almost have to be like at Indiana, Colton, you know, every off spur, you would have to have metering, so you know how many cars are coming in and off, and then also at the top and end, and really figure that out. Because for me, the primary goal or primary objective in the transportation would be for the community, the residents, right? It's not the people who are coming through using it as a through fare. And yeah, it'd be great to be able to have them, you know, as they're coming through, go, oh, you know what, there's a nice restaurant here, I'm gonna slow down, or because I'm going slow, I see that there's a nice restaurant here, or you know, oh yeah, I forgot Target's there, I'm gonna drop in. It's mostly, I mean, 99% of it is that we're focused on the residents, right? And so I think it's also something that it's training or just educating the population of Superior and the people who are very anxious to get places, right? Just need it to be a straight line along Colton versus, you know, the meandering path, and slow down, enjoy life, right? And I think that that's one of the things that, you know, through an education process, it's something that could kind of change the entire mentality of the town, because I'm pretty sure that like 60%, 70% of the town has the same mentality of, you know, this is our neighborhood, we're gonna go slow. And then it's that outlier that's gonna drive fast, and a little more education to those people, you know, might be able to assist in it.
and to your point, Jason, I mean, it's supported by the survey results of that survey that was performed in 2013. You know, the vast majority of respondents said, slow down, put more roundabouts in, make it tolerable, you know, make all of the things that we're saying we want to achieve, you know, let's work on that. You get a few outliers
Right.
who, you know, they want to get from A to B as fast as they can
Yeah,
get there.
which I always go back to the, you know, the Rock Island, and the people who complain about it are the ones that hit it, you know, but it's great. I mean, the majority of the people in our neighborhood think that little island with the 4 big rocks in it is a great job, and it looks good, but you do see on social media, you see people complaining about it, and I'm like, that's probably the person that bounced off, or their kid bounced off of the curb and hit it, and so.
Well, I'm real encouraged by everybody's feedback on this. I mean, it sounds like we're all looking at the same issues in the same way. So.
Yeah. Commissioner Sawtelle, my concern would be that we not reinvent the wheel here. If there are studies that have been done and there are designs that have been made, I think maybe one of the places to start would be to look at that and kind of revisit those, and then see where we can go from there. I have mixed feelings about it, because I think that there are a lot of people coming from Arvada and Westminster, coming through our town, and some of those people stop, but most of them keep going. And I think that, by simply slowing them down or attempting to slow them down won't have the effect that we're hoping for here. Because, we can spend a lot of money and design the most beautiful road or, thoroughfare, between Rock Creek Parkway and 128 as we'd like. But if people are in a hurry to get from Arvada to Boulder or to Louisville, they're going to be in a hurry, and they're still going to speed through that. So I think that we, have to be careful about how much more we try to introduce, and look at what we have on, in plan, and see if that might be a way to curtail some of that.
I like your idea. We've got a lot of good information in these plans. There was a lot of good studies. Alex is a great resource. But as someone who used to, commute in a community south of here, back up here, there's very few north-south options, I mean, and I think we have to face a little bit of reality on that too, that there aren't very many good options. Wadsworth is no fun at all. Indiana is an option, Highway 93 is out there, but it's a little, it's pretty far west. So how do we balance the fact that people are going to be driving through here, make it safer for our residents? And I think, I certainly think that all of these plans that we've adopted, I think, for the most part, can accommodate a lot of these things. I think the biggest thing related to McCaslin is it hasn't been prioritized.
Right.
I mean, I would imagine that if we implement a lot of these things that are already identified, that would go a long way to addressing your concerns, I would imagine.
I agree with you, Lisa. I mean, we went through this whole process, and I agree, Anthony, with you. I mean, it's never going to be 100%, but there are things that we can do, and we can start by doing the things that we said we were going to do. And then if that's not enough, then we can talk about whether it makes sense to do anything more. Maybe it doesn't. I do think on the issues specifically that Bob has focused on with Original Town, I don't think the transportation plan addressed a lot about Original Town, so I think we do need to get out in front of that.
I think Original Town's more than transportation. I think
Oh, I
it's
think it is
zoning,
too.
I think it's connectivity, connectivity is part of transportation. I think Original Superior is broader than transportation, so.
But transportation or traffic is one of our, I mean, that is one of our bigger issues right now. It's just people, and it's primarily Coal Creek. I mean, it's just the other route instead of Marshall Road, right? And I mean, I'd like to directly work with staff and try to push from a citizen's perspective to try to get some mitigation in there sooner rather than later to give us time to work through an overall plan for that area. I think there's some immediate need there, but I think overall planning that whole area out and getting some policies written that we're going to stick to would be great to do.
I think that'd be good. I mean, I think if you were to measure what we can do as a commission that would have the greatest impact on the greatest number of residents, apart from, our involvement with Town Center, I don't know that there's anything more we could do besides transportation that would improve the lives of more residents, and especially those, and I'm not just speaking for myself, but all of those houses that you see lining McCaslin. I mean, it would make a dramatic improvement in their lives if we could, whether it's lower the speed limit. I know Alex in the plan had talked about berms, noise reduction, the roundabout at Indiana, just stuff like that. And I don't think we're talking about breaking the bank either. It's.
Well, and, I mean, it also has to, it has to be thoughtful of the development down here, right? Because if all of a sudden this area just continues to explode, then all of a sudden we're going to create frustration down here because there's just so many people, right? So there are some areas we don't have control over right now. We have some negotiation ability, in Rogers Farm. The developers interested in talking to us, so we have some ability to talk with them. They'd like to do the right thing. That seems really clear. So thinking, also just thinking about how many homes do we want to build in this area, and what does it mean to do that? Being thoughtful, how many, what's going to go into downtown Superior, what's going to happen on Rogers Farm, what could happen in the everything, I guess, not just Original Town, but the marketplace and behind Costco, and right. I mean, all of a sudden you could have even hundreds, another 1,000, 1,200 people could have homes on that side of McCaslin, and so thinking about that as we're looking through this as well to see if that's
kind of scary.
Yeah, I mean,
It is. Yeah.
do we want to discourage transit-oriented development? Do we want to discourage residential development behind Costco? Do we want to, those are where do we have some influence? Where can we be thinking about these things? Because there are places we don't that we're gonna have to deal with anyway. So I think that, because that's all gonna impact how bad the traffic is down here. And we don't have a great road infrastructure, so thinking about, what happens if we add 3,000 people to this area plus the downtown, that's gonna have just, 7 years from now, that's gonna be dramatic. I mean, we're a little frustrated now on Marshall Road and McCaslin.
Yeah.
I mean, so.
It's sobering when you see the projections, the traffic projections, and what it looks like 5 years and 10 years.
Look at Boulder. Boulder's building 4 new hotels, I think it is. They've already widened 36 to facilitate movement back and forth, basically between Denver, but then everything that falls in between Denver and CU Boulder.
And we have
is
2 or
gonna
3
fill in.
hotels, right?
Pardon?
We have 2 or 3 hotels that we're
Right.
One
looking at
approved,
here,
yeah.
right?
But I'm just saying, in terms of the influx of people that reflects, we have to assume that it's gonna get worse and worse. And then to say, well, we'll deal with hypothetically 88th Street in a couple of years or something. No, you gotta deal with it now, because there's funding, and what do you have to widen a bridge, or what do you have to widen a road, and talking with Louisville, or
Right.
all that other stuff that comes with it.
Yeah.
You can't just pick it up and run with it at the
Right.
moment. You gotta lay some groundwork.
Need to double the size of our diamond. Just kidding.
Well,
Now that
and
we're
as
done.
someone who lives north of Rock Creek, in Rock Creek Ranch, but I live north of Rock Creek Parkway, certainly, and I know you probably would agree with this, traffic on 88th Street, and I know the Transportation and Safety Committee meeting that they held a couple months ago. There's certainly a lot of community interest, and I understand we're probably a little limited in some of our discussions, related to that with potential applications that we'll be reviewing, but, I don't want to forget. I know that there certainly is a lot of community interest. We saw that here tonight by someone who chose to, 2 ladies who just chose to come down here. That's certainly of interest to me. I think more connectivity in that area is something I would be fine with. Let's give people options in and out of there. So.
Seems like we're in a little bit of a bind here, because, I think we rely a lot on developers that come in to help build our infrastructure. And if someone comes in and say, well, I want to build 1,000 houses here, we then have some power to negotiate and say, okay, we'll then put in 3 additional lanes, or something like that, or 2 additional lanes. If we start trying to take on all of that ourselves as a town, then we do run into these budgetary problems and these constraints. That
And that's
are
why
related to
McCaslin's a
that.
difficult challenge, because nobody's developing there anymore.
Exactly.
Boulder
And
County's
there's
not
one-
gonna do anything on the west side, and
It's all
so,
over.
yeah, so it's on the town.
Mhm.
Yeah.
So, that's kind of where I see us, and it would be nice to, try and figure all of that out. It's one of the thoughts that I was having was that we just go ahead as a town, try and finance, the building of infrastructure, so that it's in place. And then, move forward with looking for developers that'll come in and build around that infrastructure that's in place. But that becomes cost prohibitive.
That's right.
Then if we leave it up to the developers, we're kind of at their mercy about what we get there and how much say we have in that. So it's a quandary.
Well, I agree with you, Anthony. I think, though, I think there's a lot that we could do that would be easy. Lower the speed limit by 5 miles per hour, put in a speed bump, something to discourage travel down, down Coal Creek, or, put in the roundabout that we approved 4 years ago. Just stuff like that we're not doing and we haven't prioritized. And if we don't prioritize it, this development's gonna get way out ahead of us, and then it's gonna be hard.
Right.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
And Commissioner Sato, I think you're right. Simple things as easy as lowering the speed limit initially, to start making changes, to maybe make that recommendation to the board from our next hearing, official meeting, and start the ball rolling, and start chipping away at things that we want to see that are affordable, that are doable, that we can see within the next year. They, like, Commissioner Ritchie mentioned prioritizing things and making a plan for the next 2-3 years of what can we get done in that time frame. What's feasible.
And, I mean, we may be raising, I haven't learned a whole lot about home rule, but it's opening up has the potential to open up some options for us as well. Increased revenue seems to be being just thrown about like it's a given, right? I don't know that that's really true, but that's certainly one of the selling points to throwing out. And I don't know what other options we have, you know, if we govern ourselves and set our own charter and, you know, what we might be able to do to help maybe fund some of these things, including shifting priorities.
Well, and I don't want you guys to think that I'm like blue sky about, you know, investments and so forth, but you know, once we have some commercial development over here, there's gonna be a fair amount of sales tax flowing into this little 12,000 person town. I think we're gonna have plenty of money to pay for plenty of things. It's just a matter of, you know, we don't wanna lose the character of our community in the process. That's the only thing. So.
Yeah, I mean, you bring 2,000 people in here, and Costco's going to get a lot busier, and Target's going to be a lot busier, and you know, our marketplace is generally going to be a lot busier. That's for sure.
And any transportation changes that we do further down the road are going to be that much more impactful with 2,000 more people trying to fit through that bottleneck.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. And we may, you know, be looking at our tax structure too, and our sales tax structure. I haven't looked at it real closely as what we're charging sales tax for and where it's going, and is that what still makes sense today? You know,
that's the big revenue driver for the town.
It
isn't
is. Yeah. I mean, it might be time to be just thinking outside the box as to, you know, how can we fund this stuff?
We're gonna need a war chest to do all this stuff.
Yeah.
And that's if it's just McCaslin, much less if it goes into 88, because then you got widening the bridge and all sorts of other things of far greater import dollar-wise.
Well, go ahead.
No,
I was gonna say, it sounds like we've heard kind of 4 things. Are there any other? I don't wanna
let's
rush
take a
us
look at
along. I'm
Stephen.
just-
No, that's all right. We need to be rushed.
Oh, do we have to go look at what we were supposed to be doing?
Yeah. Oh, yeah,
Stephen's
this is what
been
we
a-
talked about.
This is what I typed up as and this is just the order that I put it in, but if you guys want to make any changes or separate stuff out, I've really just kind of had it as 2 things. The Northwest Small Area Plan and the Transportation Plan. And this, was kind of McCaslin improvement, so maybe 88th Street needs to get separated out, or we move McCaslin down to A or something, but however you guys want to adjust it. I just threw it out there to keep placeholders.
You don't mind if we edit your way?
Not at all. Edit away. This is your
Okay.
document.
I mean, you could even, include McCaslin and 88 together because it is part of the transportation plan, and they would have the same concerns as safety, noise mitigation, and traffic.
I would say implement McCaslin improvements.
That's.
Because we've got them identified for the most part, right?
Right, under B.
Yeah.
Yeah, or execute. I don't think we need further study. I think we need execution.
Might be nice for us just to revisit it. I'd like to get it.
Right, and I think.
Not redo it,
Internally.
but.
Sure, but just to do a,
Yeah. I just don't
And
want to give the
Stephen,
board
could-
the impression that we're
Yeah.
saying.
Could you send us
You're
the
right.
we don't
scrap
wanna
copy
open
of
the
that
can.
transportation plan from
Maybe we
2012?
just- Right.
Yeah.
I like what you said, let's
Email
not
it to
reinvent
us.
the wheel here.
Yeah.
I can either email it or I think it's online. but
Is it online?
It should be online.
Yeah,
but,
the plan.
I can
Yeah,
send
it
you the
is.
link or
Is it?
clarify
I've
it,
got it.
whatever.
Yeah.
Okay, I'll go look it up.
Can we add RTD up on number 1 in the parentheses where you have original town, Sagamore, Coal Creek, Marketplace, and RTD?
Mm.
Park and ride.
The potential
The-
TOD.
Yeah,
kind
the
of thing.
TOD, yeah, the TOD
RTD,
stuff.
TOD, okay.
Oh, and I guess that would include, what do we call the properties behind 76th Street parcels? Is that what we call them, I think? 76th Street parcels is how they're labeled.
Behind Costco? Or-
Yeah.
That's just kind of our area of influence, you mean? The stuff that's
Yeah.
not annexed?
Yeah,
yet?
just
Okay.
listing some of the major areas of influence there.
And I think, Stephen, to mirror the language in the transportation plan under item 2, after McCaslin, I would put McCaslin corridor.
Mm.
That was the term of art that was used throughout the
Yeah.
plan.
could we somehow maybe, and you don't need to type anything yet, but you brought up some really good sort of guerrilla tactic, short-term things that we may want to brainstorm on, lowering the speed limit. You know, I've got a couple on Cold Creeks or you know, things to discourage traffic, things that we could almost do immediately that would be low budget.
Yeah.
That are kind of beyond or ahead of maybe what this will look like.
See, I like that. You know, back when we were talking
Yeah.
about it, when we launched into the transportation plan before, of course, I was a newbie at the time, and I didn't know what I didn't know, but I thought, well, why wouldn't we just do, you know, let's spend $1,000 and get new speed limit signs? You know, I mean, that, you know, I'd kick in. Or, you know, I'm
Or
sure
some,
that.
like some monuments and some speed limit
Yeah.
signs and a
Yeah.
little stricter enforcement and.
That's what I was
you
gonna
know,
say,
pay
is
for
like
another
increase,
traffic cop.
yeah, increase the
Yeah.
budget
enforcement.
slightly for, or, you
Yeah.
know, for,
Like immediate relief type things.
right. Because
Put in-
I
put
also
in a
don't think it's
camera.
fair, I don't think it's fair to take the presence away from a lot of the other streets, because, I mean, I
Yeah.
could claim that over on Yarrow Circle, people are flying down that hill all the time, you know, it's
Yeah.
downhill and people are, and so I don't wanna, you know, take away from any part of the community, enforcement. I think it needs to be increased, if, you know,
Mhm.
even slightly, just to, you know, even one day a week, you know, having an officer sitting out on McCaslin, and, you know, a little
Would
bit
help.
more would be.
Tell you put a van with a camera in it. That slows, I mean, people learn that really fast. you
I'm
know?
also not I'm not a big fan of the empty car sitting there with the
Yeah,
man
right,
in it.
exactly.
It's like every mountain town.
Yeah.
Commissioner McCool, to your point of a photo radar camera, where, you know, if you run through the red light at a certain time, or if you exceed a certain speed limit by a certain
Yeah,
speed.
threshold, yeah.
It shoots a photograph of you.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, Daryl got one of those and
Yeah.
shouldn't say on TV, but,
I
you know,
just-
that,
I just
years
received
ago.
one
and
in the mail from the city
it
of
slows you
Boulder.
down, right?
Yeah.
You know now.
It's
You
a
don't-
revenue driver.
Yeah, don't,
right?
that too.
That's to my point. I was last through a stoplight in Boulder recently and got photographed, and I have a ticket at home I have to pay for $75.
Yep.
And I've seen that in the evenings I have meetings in downtown Boulder, where people fly through these stoplights and you can see the lights
Mhm.
shine and flash and go off. And you know that those 3 cars all are getting tickets.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
3 times 75, you know, it probably happens 100 times a day.
Well, and I'd be curious to know too, just even if we don't go that far, but you know, like on Rock Creek and on 88th, and I don't know if we have any on McCaslin, they have the radar, with,
Yeah,
you know, like when
yeah.
you come over the bridge on
Mhm.
88th,
They took
they
that
tell you how
away.
fast we're going.
They took that one away.
Did they?
Yeah,
Huh.
Yeah, that one's
What-
gone.
It hasn't been there for a while. I don't know if it's being repaired or moved
Oh,
or
okay.
what.
But I don't know if there's one of those on McCaslin, like, so maybe.
There is heading south,
Okay.
Right.
right before the roundabout.
But they
Okay.
really need it coming north
Coming
on
north,
128.
right. So maybe, yeah, little things though. I think the point you've captured that is prioritize and let's start with the easy things that we can.
Commissioner Lisa's suggestion about the metering, this, you know, the legs and staggers, we might wanna try to recommend that, because who knows how much it's changed since it was done initially.
For what now? The.
Traffic flow from the
Traffic
different
through.
sections, how many vehicles, how much.
Oh, yeah, from 128 to Colton, and Colton to Rock Creek Circle, Rock Creek Parkway,
Yeah, right.
and then Rock Creek Parkway down to
If we
Marshall.
put a photo radar in between Indiana and 128, catching that northbound traffic,
We could fund your whole project.
we would pay for the town budget in a month.
We could pay for the park. Maybe not.
I don't think that's what you're supposed to do.
But then there'd be stories on the news about
I
it.
know.
Yeah, well,
I was gonna
That's
say-
just that we
I'll
might.
I'll take that
Only
hit.
for a
Some
year or
people
so.
might not wanna go that far. I don't know.
No.
I'm
But no, I
sorry.
do like some of the low-hanging fruit. I like how
Yep.
he put it up there,
Yep.
you know.
Yeah, that's good.
So maybe easy, inexpensive things we can do to
Yeah.
encourage better behavior.
Well, it promotes safety, excuse me.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
Yes, that was it.
No, I was just gonna restate, I really like that, because I think, in my experience, I think sometimes we allow perfection to become the enemy of the good.
Mhm.
You know, and we wanna wait until we've got, you know, $1 bazillion in the budget to build the Taj Mahal, when all we really need are a few things that really wouldn't take very much to implement and
Yeah.
make a huge impact.
Mhm.
And maybe we find out it takes care of 75, 80%. You know,
Mhm.
maybe
That's
get
right.
lucky. You never know, but.
Anyone else have any other thoughts? Y'all have great ideas.
I'm just wondering then, for the purposes of the dinner, to communicate this to the board, is this something that you intend to maybe share with them ahead of time, or have on the table, or how does that work?
We're gonna try, yeah. We're gonna probably update Granicus. We would like to have this before they now get their agenda items almost a week in advance. So those
Yeah.
went out today for next Monday's meeting. So we'll send an update, let them know that we have these topics that you guys want to discuss next week.
Great.
And update Granicus accordingly. I'll send this over to Martin probably tonight. And then you guys get to discuss it. And, I mean, are you content with, I mean, I'll take obviously bullet 3 away, but how everything's reading? Or,
Mhm.
to me, I guess, I think that the number one, obviously bridges the, it's both a small area plan and it's a revisitation of transportation and traffic in that area. So if you think that captures it, or we can restate it under the transportation plan too, the concerns for Coal Creek. But it's up to you.
I think it looks fine.
I think it looks good.
Okay.
Yeah, could we, I mean, does it make sense to request, so, do we want to request an action from the board on this? That, I mean, I don't know if that's pushing it too far, but one thing I said last night, I stood up and I said, so what exactly is the next action that has to happen in order to make some of these things come to fruition? Because we just talk and then a meeting goes by, and then our meeting comes, and then we don't have enough, we can't get on the agenda, and then it doesn't make the agenda. You know, what exactly needs to happen?
Yeah.
Right, can we request an action from the board, or at least understand what that action needs to be in order for them to, assign the task of comprehensive plan and review and transportation plan?
I would
implementation?
think that for the first item, the Northwest Superior Small Area Plan, the town would be well served to have a consultant in place to facilitate that. And that, I think the first action then would be through, either through the board agreeing and then adopting through the budget process, or a different appropriation of some means, to really tackle that one, I think, in the right manner.
Yeah.
I think we need a budget. I think that's the action, the concrete action we'd have to see.
Well, and I would welcome, Stephen, your thoughts. I know I asked Martin that same question relative to item 2, but I think we could treat him
Yeah,
the
no,
same
so
way.
that's a good point. I mean, everything's gonna require a budget, and budgets are typically set. So this year's budget for 2017's already been set. But what can get moved around, or, what, leftover budget we have, it may be more minimal for 2017, but I also think that a lot of, what you're gonna be studying and coming up with, like, a plan or revisiting the comprehensive plan, whether or not we have the budget for an RFP for, a study or something like that, is a different, but I think that you can still work on either one or both of these goals over the course of 2017, with the idea that you're gonna have a budget in 2018 to implement it. So there's a lot of legwork to go into either one of these things that I don't think would prevent you from working on it. And I think that low-hanging fruit, and there's a lot of things that we can do, and we can start thinking about, how else to finance those things. Those are all great questions, like there's likely mechanisms. I'm not coming up with one because I haven't done a lot of infrastructure type of, work, but there's business improvement districts that help you build infrastructure when there's businesses in place. I'm sure there's some sort of tax or some sort of other measure that you could look at to help finance, or some of the impacts that all the development, happens or something. So I don't know what the board's direction is. So I really think that your first step is to get some idea from the board as to whether or not, these two things, or which of these two things, or and even what the priority kind of is. But I think that there's a overwhelming kind of, transportation and traffic impacts is, a common theme throughout all of this, and maybe that's, the place where we start on all this. But I also think that, to Commissioner McCool's point, that there is push and a desire to have, the comprehensive plan kind of looked at, and the zoning for original town in particular looked at. So, it's a lot, and that's gonna be the trick, is to, focus it down and figure out what you can do. I mean, you as a commission can do a lot of studying and legwork and try to figure out, but these are all good conversations to start having, and I guess, as I said already, like 2017 may be where we formulate a lot of ideas and a lot of plans and start to kind of figure out mechanisms that we can, you know, help implement these things. But implementation is tricky, you know, because it does require money and prioritization, prioritization, excuse me.
If I could just read what Martin had to say, because I think you guys were both on this. He said, and this was on item 2, but I think it would apply to item 1 as well. Having Planning Commission involved in a policy discussion regarding improvements to McCaslin south of Colton is a great idea from staff's perspective. To convey the Planning Commission sentiment, if there's a consensus on this item, I'd suggest developing a recommendation via a motion for the Planning Commission to vote on that might synthesize the outcome and timeline that's desired. So I would envision, and I'm open to whatever anybody else thinks, we give the board the heads up, hey, we're gonna work on these 2 things this year, because we wanna see action on it. And we're gonna be working on them toward the end of bringing a resolution to the town board recommending that they implement A, B, C, and D. That's what I think, that would be our role, right, as a
Yeah, and I
commission?
think that, I mean, with everything kind of, I mean, schedule-wise, I haven't been involved with a lot of the budget stuff, but I know that it starts in the summertime,
Mhm.
and then it gets vetted, you know, through the fall and actually approved, you know, November-ish. So, I mean, like, if you have, you know, these recommendations in place that you're gonna be pushing forward, then, you know, you probably wanna have some idea or be able to convey what the budget is or what it might
Mhm.
cost, or, you know, and it's all gonna take some time to get those things in place, but it'll probably align fairly well if you start working on these things now,
Mhm.
so.
Does that sound good to you, Bob?
Yeah, no, that sounds good. I mean, again, getting the board to start thinking about this and figuring out if they want to adjust priorities this year for where the expenditures are happening. I mean, I think they've got a big group of us sitting up here saying we really need to jump on this pretty quick, or it's gonna get beyond us.
Yeah. Lisa, what do you think?
I agree. I think that there's certainly things we can do. Thank you. There's certainly things that we can discuss and with staff support, help make some recommendations and come up with, you know, some of the easier things to do, and then develop resolutions and some recommendations, or, you know, approve through a resolution for the board to consider. I think it's an appropriate time to have our dinner next week. I'm excited about that. I'm looking forward to having this discussion, kind of getting their thumbs up or thumbs down, or tweaking these, you know, with their guidance. Obviously, we work under their direction, so I like where we ended up tonight.
Yep.
So would it be premature to look at adding an agenda item to our next proper meeting
I don't think it's
to
premature.
address maybe the speed limit signs?
I would
As
go-
the low-hanging fruit, and see if what we can get seeing what we can get
We could always
accomplished.
come with our ideas of the low-hanging fruit, you
Mhm.
know.
I think come with ideas of the low-hanging stuff, and then get direction from the board next Monday too. I think that would probably be.
At some point, I hate to keep summoning Alex, you know.
No.
But we should probably get his input on these
Yeah,
things,
that's
you
a good
know.
idea.
Because he's been dealing with this forever, so.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and he's gonna have ideas that we're
We
not,
haven't thought of.
yeah.
Yeah.
He did say tax was one of the last things he said before he left the room last time he was here, so.
Yeah, that's the tricky thing. You never want to mention that, you know, like as an additional cost. But I think Alex can come, and I think that, you know, we can have this discussion again, you know, or more, you know, directed discussion with specific questions as to, well, these are our concerns and what can we do? And, you know, even your, I guess it's the speed signal thing on the one side of the street versus the other side of the street. What would that take? And,
Mhm.
you know, staff can start looking at what kind of, you know, grants or other monies out there, you know, but those are all things that, I mean, I guess what I'm trying to say is I'd encourage you to, you know, you have kind of a more longer range vision, and you have some shorter range, you know, like more, so it could get overwhelming, or it could get kind of complicated, but, you know, try to prioritize what can be done now, and then also think about like the really long-term, more comprehensive vision for both parts of it, so.
I like that. I think if we can get some immediate action, doesn't have to be perfection, just something on some of these issues, and recognize that some of them are gonna take a little more time, a little more planning, and
And some of those intermediary type of steps are what give you the feedback to figure out what, you know, what really needs to happen longer term too, so.
Mhm.
If we go for the low-hanging fruit, do we want to make some kind of a statement, or I hesitate to use the word warning to the town as to some of the changes that are going to happen, or at least comment as to why we're trying this or doing this?
To the public.
To the public, sure. I mean, it's who we represent, right?
Well,
So-
I mean, that's, yeah, and, I don't know, public hearings make sense, and trying to, you know, I mean, we can all probably even push it out on our own social media to encourage people to come to the planning commission meeting, because we're gonna be talking about some things that are gonna impact people. You know, the town has their,
Right, and we'll need to coordinate with the Transportation and Safety Commission too, as to,
Yeah.
you know, where,
Mhm.
I mean, but we'll see how that goes. I think they just had a meeting last night. I haven't had a chance to talk to Alex yet since then, but.
Yeah, once again, I think we have data from a previous report that we can use regarding what the public's input is. I think you mentioned that, right, Commissioner
We do,
Sawtelle?
we
Yes.
do.
So for myself, I think it would be good for the public to see that we're moving on this, and that this is not just another item that has been pushed aside and revisited, and now it's time to redo it. And I think that the impression that I get from a lot of people in our community is that that's what happens sometimes. And, you know, I'd like to avoid that if possible, and use this data that we already have.
I agree.
and is all that in the plan? Those,
In the transportation plan?
yeah,
Well,
public input, or is that?
oh, yeah, no, there definitely was. And it's, if anybody's interested, I have copies of the slides that Alex presented to the town board at the January 13, 2014 meeting, which detailed basically all of the feedback that was received from all of the public meetings. Also have the survey results that were presented to the town board.
A lot of that, the background information though, might not
Be
be
in the
reflected in there, but I'm certain you could probably find some of them in the packets, you know, from the meetings at that time, or they could, you know, staff could maybe
Yeah.
get those to us, but like a lot of this stuff I know was in,
Yeah, it's
you
not
know,
in the
assorted.
plan.
It's not in the plan, it
Yeah.
informed the plan, but it's
Mhm.
in the, kind of the agenda packets and things.
Is that something you could pull together for us?
Yeah, I
in
mean,
background?
it's already been pulled together. It just
Okay,
needs to be
and
shared
just
with
send it out to
everybody,
us?
yeah.
Yeah, I think
Okay.
Martin emailed it to me, so.
Yeah.
That'd be
I'll
awesome.
just forward that on, yeah. Okay, anybody else have anything for the good of the cause?
Thanks.
All right, thanks, everyone.
Yep, thank you.
Do I have to hit this? Makes me feel good.